They told me to cry at his funeral. But I couldn't. Because I already cried the night I found out the truth. Would you still cry if you discovered the person you loved had planned your destruction before they died? Promise me, if anything ever happens, you'll remember me smiling. He'd smiled too, that practiced, charming smile that once made me feel safe. Now it just makes my stomach twist. As I stand there, I can almost taste the metal of the key that unlocked everything, the secret drawer, the hidden phone, the photographs. I remember the nightlight flickering when I read those messages, the way my heart beat so hard I thought I might die first. The people here see a woman holding herself together, they don't see the movie playing behind my eyes, every lie, every staged apology, every manipulation. The wind kicks up. My veil flutters across my face like a whisper trying to silence me. I lower it slowly, deliberately. Then I smile. Not because I'm happy he's gone. Because finally, I'm free of pretending. They used to call us the perfect couple. Even now, standing at his funeral, I can still hear it, that careful envy in their voices. You two were made for each other. I'd smile politely, the same smile that made me seem gracious and stable, while inside I kept thinking, if only they knew. Our house looked like a picture torn from a lifestyle magazine, white fence, manicured lawn, a porch swing that creaked like an old lullaby. He'd wrap his arms around me every morning before work, kiss my forehead, whisper, "Lucky woman." And I believed him. Because believing was easier than seeing. The first cracks were invisible. It started with silence, small, heavy pauses that used to be filled with laughter. He stopped asking about my day, stopped noticing the little things. His eyes would drift to his phone mid-conversation. At night, he'd face the other way. I thought it was work, stress, anything but what it really was. I told myself love changes, that comfort replaces passion. But it wasn't comfort I felt, it was absence. The kind that hums under your skin like static. Then came the phone he guarded like a newborn. The late-night meetings that stretched into dawn. The faint trace of a perfume I never wore, caught on his collar when he hugged me out of habit. Each new lie was wrapped in the same old tenderness. Trust is marriage's oxygen, he used to say. And I was learning to breathe in smoke. At dinner parties, I played the role, charming wife, doting hostess, effortless perfection. The smile on my lips became a ritual. When people looked at me, they saw stability. When I looked at myself in the mirror later, I saw someone who'd been trained not to scream. I remember one night in particular, the thunder outside, the way his phone lit up on the table. A message preview blinked for just a second. Enough for me to read it. Once she signs, we're clear. That was it. No name. No heart emojis. Just business cold calculation. I stared at it for a long time, the world narrowing into that single, sterile sentence. It wasn't the message of a lover. It was the message of a man preparing for life after me. And I knew, he wasn't planning to leave me, he was planning to erase me. I deleted the text before he came back into the room. I smiled. I asked if he wanted tea. My voice didn't even tremble. That's when I realized how easy lying can become once your heart stops caring. That night, while he slept, I sat in the dark and traced the outline of his face with my eyes. The man I thought I knew. The man who taught me that silence could be a weapon. I thought about every promise, every anniversary toast, every time he told me we were unbreakable. He was right. We were unbreakable, because I was the only one left holding the pieces. Have you ever realized the person lying next to you might be rehearsing your destruction while you dream beside them? That was the night something inside me woke up, cold, awake, calculating. I stopped being his wife. I started being the woman who watches, remembers, and waits. Because if he had his plans, I was already writing mine. The morning after that message, I didn't cry. I didn't confront him. I made breakfast like nothing had changed, scrambled eggs, black coffee, his favorite toast with too much butter. I watched him eat. He smiled between bites, talked about meetings and deadlines, kissed my cheek before leaving. And when the door closed, I finally exhaled. It felt like I'd been holding my breath for years. That day, I didn't go to work. I stayed home, pacing the same hardwood floors we'd chosen together. My reflection followed me in every polished surface, same calm face, same careful eyes. But beneath that, something restless stirred. Something sharp. I opened his office door. For years, that room had been his kingdom, the one place I wasn't supposed to enter. He'd claimed it was full of confidential documents. I used to respect that boundary. Love teaches you not to pry. But love was gone now. The air inside smelled of cedar and arrogance. Every file, every drawer, was a shrine to his success. Contracts, tax papers, property deeds, all signed by both of us. But the more I looked, the more I saw my name in the wrong places. Signatures that weren't quite mine. Initials that bent differently. Dates I didn't remember. That's when my hands started to shake. Not from fear, from understanding. He'd been preparing for months. Maybe years. Moving money, selling assets, signing my name onto things that didn't exist. Slowly cutting me out of everything we built, piece by piece, until nothing would be left but my confusion and his freedom. And the best part? He was doing it with a smile. I found a folder tucked behind an old ledger. Inside was a printed email thread, him and some woman named Lydia. Their tone wasn't romantic. It was strategic. Cold. Calculating. She'll never know what hit her, one line read. By the time she does, it'll be done. Lydia's signature, a legal consultant. He wasn't cheating with love. He was cheating with law. That realization broke something inside me in a way tears couldn't fix. It wasn't just betrayal, it was annihilation, dressed as professionalism. I sat there, surrounded by his secrets, and the strangest thing happened. I smiled. Because for the first time, I saw him clearly, not as my husband, but as an opponent. And opponents can be studied. Outsmarted. Undone. He thought I'd never look. He thought silence meant weakness. He forgot who built that silence in the first place. That night, I waited for him to come home. He walked in humming, loosened his tie, kissed my forehead. I asked about his day. He said, long. I just want to forget work. And I said softly, you will. He didn't hear the promise in my voice. He poured himself a drink. I poured one too. Our glasses clinked like gunmetal. And as he talked about tomorrow's meetings, I looked at him and thought. You have no idea that your story already ended. That was the night I began collecting evidence, copies of documents, screenshots, voice notes. I wasn't planning revenge. Not yet. I was planning freedom. But freedom, as I'd soon learn, sometimes demands a sacrifice. What would you give up to destroy the person who built your cage? After that night, I became the woman he always wanted, gentle, agreeable, predictable. The kind of woman who smiled when he lied, who asked how his day was, who pretended not to notice the scent of someone else's perfume on his shirts. But every smile had purpose now. Every kiss was reconnaissance. He thought the storm had passed. He had no idea he was standing in the eye of it. In the mornings, I packed his lunch. In the evenings, I poured his whiskey. Between those hours, I built a secret life inside our home. Hidden folders on a backup drive. Disposable phones. A new email account under a different name. I traced his transactions, logged his calls, recorded everything that could expose him. He taught me to be quiet, he never taught me to be stupid. I learned that Lydia wasn't just a consultant. She was a handler. She was helping him dissolve our assets offshore, under a shell company named Black Alder Investments. A pretty name for something rotten. Every night, after he fell asleep, I'd lie beside him and listen to his breathing, steady, careless. I wondered how many breaths he had left before the truth would devour him whole. Sometimes, I almost pitied him. Almost. One night, he stirred and murmured, "You okay?" I said, "Just can't sleep." He smiled in the dark. You worry too much. And I whispered, not anymore. It became a performance, a marriage of masks. He thought he was deceiving me. I was documenting his every move. They say the most dangerous woman is the one who learns to act harmless. Weeks passed. I grew colder, sharper. But on the surface, I looked radiant, glowing with a peace he couldn't understand. He even told me, you seem happier. I said, maybe I finally accepted everything. He didn't ask what everything meant. I started visiting his office building when he wasn't around. I brought coffee to his assistants, smiled politely, listened. People love to talk when they think you're harmless. That's how I learned about the cabin, a small lakeside property he'd purchased under Lydia's name. He called it an investment project. I called it evidence. And still, I waited. Because revenge, when done right, doesn't rush. It ripens. Then came the evening he told me he'd be traveling for a few days, for work. He kissed me, goodbye, said, don't wait up. I didn't. I followed. The GPS on his car synced perfectly to my backup device. I watched his stop move west on the map, to that same cabin by the lake. When I arrived hours later, the windows glowed warm. Inside, shadows moved. 2 wine glasses. Laughter. A woman's silhouette. Lydia. I didn't confront them. I just stood outside, in the cold, watching the scene like a ghost of myself. And in that silence, I realized something terrifying. I wasn't angry anymore. I was calm. Too calm. Because the moment your pain stops screaming, that's when it starts planning. When I drove back home, I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I wrote. I wrote a confession, not for the police, not for friends, but for myself. A letter that began. If you're reading this, then I finally found peace. I saved it in a folder titled Her Final Act. There's a kind of silence that only comes before a storm, a thick, expectant quiet. That's how my house felt in the days after the cabin. I moved through the rooms like a ghost rehearsing her own haunting. He came back on a Thursday morning, the same faint trace of someone else's perfume still clinging to his jacket. He smiled like nothing had changed. And that was the last lie he ever told me to my face. I smiled back. Coffee? He nodded, already checking his phone, already planning another escape. He didn't see me watching him, didn't notice that my hands didn't tremble anymore when I poured his drink. I had a plan now. It wasn't dramatic, not loud or messy. It was built on patience, the one skill every betrayed woman learns too well. I started small. His passwords were child's play. He used our wedding date for everything. From there, I unraveled his life, credit transfers, offshore accounts, secret investments under Lydia's name, emails promising her a life away from the noise. They were planning to disappear. He was draining everything, including the trust fund my late father had left me. That's when I stopped being his wife. I became his consequence. They say revenge makes you ugly. I think it only reveals the beauty of balance. I opened a new account under Lydia's alias. Transferred funds from his hidden shell companies into it, one by one, small enough to slip under alerts, large enough to hurt. Each night, after he fell asleep, I moved more money, deleting traces, encrypting files, rerouting logins through overseas VPNs. He had spent years thinking I didn't understand his world. He forgot I paid attention. The night before it happened, he sat beside me, eyes on the TV, and said, "You've been quiet lately." I said, "I'm just tired." He didn't ask from what. He never did. The next morning, I sent an anonymous tip to the Internal Revenue Service, attaching every file, every transaction, every photo of Lydia's cabin receipts. Then I waited. By evening, he got the call. I watched from the kitchen as he paced the living room, voice trembling, color draining from his face. There's been some mistake," he said into the phone. "I don't know what." He looked at me. And for the first time in years, I think he really saw me. "Did you know anything about this?" he asked. I met his eyes. "You told me once secrets don't hurt anyone, remember?" He blinked. "What did you do?" I smiled. "I just told the truth." He left the house that night, didn't say where he was going. I didn't follow. I didn't have to. When the sun rose, his car was found crashed near the old bridge outside town. They said it looked like he'd swerved off the road in panic. Maybe he had. Maybe he saw something coming that no one else could. At his funeral, they whispered, "Poor widow, she must be devastated." And I smiled, not out of joy, not out of cruelty. Out of release. You can't mourn what never truly loved you. I stood by the coffin, a calm storm in silk black. And somewhere deep inside, a voice whispered, "This is where his story ends. And mine finally begins." They say when a storm ends, the silence is deafening. They're right. After the funeral, the house didn't feel empty, it felt erased. His toothbrush still sat by the sink, the faint scent of his cologne lingered on his suit in the closet, but somehow, he was already gone long before that crash. For the first few days, I went through motions like muscle memory, wake up, shower, sit by the window. My phone buzzed with condolences I never answered. Flowers kept arriving, piling up on the porch like guilt wrapped in ribbons. I told myself I'd done the right thing. Justice. Balance. But at night, the truth whispered through the walls. "You didn't kill him," I'd tell myself. "You just set the truth free." Still, his voice wouldn't stop echoing in my mind. The way he used to say my name, like it belonged to him. The way he'd lie so gently, I'd almost thank him for it. The first week, I didn't cry. Not a tear. The second week, I screamed. Into pillows, into my own shaking hands, into the emptiness that kept replaying that final smile I gave him. That smile had power. It haunted me now. People in town looked at me differently. Pity mixed with suspicion. They whispered things about how calm I'd been, how oddly composed. I looked at the service. Someone even said, "She smiled." At her husband's funeral. I wanted to tell them the truth, that smile wasn't madness. It was closure. But explaining it would mean reopening everything I'd buried. So I stayed silent. At night, I'd pour a glass of wine and scroll through the photos on his old laptop. The ones he never thought I'd see. Him and Lydia at that same cabin, the same view I'd stared at through tears. But now, it didn't sting, it fascinated me. How ordinary betrayal can look when frozen in a picture. He looked happy. So did she. And yet both of them were ghosts now. One night, I found a folder he'd hidden. Labeled Future. Inside were forms for a new identity, travel plans, and a letter, unsigned, but written in his handwriting. "When this is over, we'll disappear. She'll never know." He was wrong. I knew. I always knew. I just waited until he couldn't run anymore. Still, sometimes, I wondered, if I had confronted him earlier, would he have stopped? Would he have looked at me and remembered who I was before we both became strangers? That question will haunt me longer than his ghost. I started walking at night, barefoot in the yard, under the cold moonlight. The wind felt like it was trying to say something, brushing through my hair, whispering through the trees. Maybe it was forgiveness. Maybe it was a warning. Revenge doesn't heal you, I realized. It just gives you something to hold while you burn. And yet, I wasn't burning anymore. The fire had gone out. All that was left was ash, and me, standing in it, finally breathing. I looked at my reflection one morning and barely recognized her. The woman in the mirror didn't look broken anymore. She looked dangerous. Beautifully dangerous. Because once you survive the worst kind of love, nothing scares you again. The first time I saw Lydia again, it was raining. Not the cinematic kind of rain, no thunder, no drama, just a quiet drizzle that blurred the edges of everything, like the world didn't want me to see her clearly. I was leaving the grocery store, holding a bag of oranges and a half-hearted sense of peace, when I saw her standing by her car. Blonde hair darker from the rain, eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses, pretending she didn't notice me. But she did. I could feel it, the kind of stillness that comes when two ghosts recognize each other. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she spoke, her voice trembling but steady enough to slice the air. You're her, aren't you? His wife. The way she said wife, like it was a word she wasn't sure she had permission to say. I smiled faintly, just enough to make her uncomfortable. Was. Her lips pressed into a thin line. I didn't know he. I cut her off. You didn't know he was married? Or you didn't know he would end up dead? She froze. For the first time, I saw the flicker of guilt behind her mask. I never meant for any of this, she whispered. He told me you were leaving him. He said you were dangerous. That word, dangerous, hit differently. It rolled through me like a pulse I didn't know I still had. Maybe he wasn't wrong. She looked terrified, but not of me. Of what I represented. Of what she had become part of. Because no matter how pretty the lie, you can't crawl into someone else's marriage without bringing the dirt with you. I stepped closer. The rain slid down between us, cold and sharp. Do you ever think about what people will say about you now? I asked quietly. They'll forget his name eventually. But yours, they'll remember. She blinked fast, maybe to hide tears. Why are you doing this? I'm not, I said softly. You are. You came back. She exhaled, shaking her head. You got what you wanted. He's gone. Isn't that enough? I thought about that for a second. Enough. What a small word. It wasn't about punishment anymore, it was about clarity. About standing face to face with the woman who was once my replacement, and realizing she was just another victim of his lies. I took a slow breath. He told me once that truth doesn't matter, only perception. I think he was wrong. The truth matters when it's the last thing left. Lydia looked like she wanted to disappear. She turned toward her car, then hesitated. He said you'd never forgive me. I met her eyes, steady and calm. I don't forgive. I remember. And then she left. No, goodbye. No closure, just the echo of her heels fading into the rain. I stood there for a long time, watching the water wash over the parking lot, carrying tiny pieces of dirt and leaves into the gutter. Everything gets cleaned eventually, I thought. Even sins. It just takes longer when they're buried deep. When I got home, I left the groceries on the counter and sat by the window. My reflection looked back at me, still, cold, untouchable. Lydia had come looking for peace. I wasn't sure I'd ever need it again. Once you've looked the devil in the eye, I whispered to my reflection, you stop fearing his disciples. That night, I slept soundly for the first time in years. No nightmares. No ghosts. Just the soft hum of rain outside and the faintest trace of a smile on my lips. Because sometimes, survival itself is the sweetest revenge. It started with a sound, a ding from my laptop at 2:17 a.m. The kind of sound that wakes you because your soul recognizes danger before your mind does. I sat up in bed, the screen's blue glow cutting through the dark like a blade. A new email. No subject line. No sender name. Just one attachment. And one line of text. You didn't finish the story. My breath caught. For a second, I told myself it was spam. But the file name, bridge-footage.mp4, made my blood run cold. The bridge. The crash. His death. I hesitated before clicking it. My finger hovered above the trackpad, trembling slightly. Then, curiosity, the same poison that had once ruined me, won again. The video opened with static. Then headlights. Rain. The shaky view of a dashboard camera. He was there, my husband. Alive. Breathing. Talking to someone. I told you, Lydia. It's done. She'll never find out. Tomorrow, we disappear. I froze. The timestamp was the night before the crash. The night I sent the files. Then, another voice. Not Lydia's. A man's. Calm. Cold. You're not going anywhere. A flash of movement. A shout. Tires screeching. The camera shook violently, then went black. I sat there, staring at the screen, unable to breathe. He hadn't lost control. He'd been stopped. I played it again, frame by frame. The silhouette beside him wasn't clear, but I saw enough, a ring glinting under the dashboard light. A ring identical to the one worn by the lawyer handling his offshore accounts. My pulse roared in my ears. It wasn't just betrayal, it was conspiracy. The man I destroyed had already been hunted by someone else. For weeks, I'd lived with guilt, thinking I had set his death in motion. But what if I'd only pulled the first thread in a web I never knew existed? I leaned back, shaking. Someone knew. Someone had been watching. The email came from an encrypted domain, untraceable. But the message was personal. You didn't finish the story. Not a threat. A taunt. I copied the file to a USB drive, locked it in a box, and poured myself a drink. My reflection in the window looked different again. Not the broken woman. Not even the Avenger. Something colder. Something awakened. For years, I'd been the audience to someone else's story, his, theirs, the world's. But this was mine now. The next morning, I drove to the bridge. The guardrails were still dented, a silent memorial to a truth no one ever questioned. I stood there, wind cutting through my coat, eyes on the river below. Whoever you are, I said softly, you made one mistake. The wind howled back, carrying my voice across the water. You reminded me I'm still alive. I didn't call the police. Not yet. Whoever sent that video wanted me to panic, to feel hunted again. But they forgot, fear had been my teacher. Now, it was my weapon. Back home, I opened a blank document. Typed 3 words. The next confession begins. Then I smiled, slow, deliberate, dangerous. He lied to me. They used me. But they forgot. I'm not the same woman anymore. The cursor blinked on the screen like a heartbeat. And somewhere inside, I realized this wasn't an ending. It was an invitation. The first rule of revenge is that it ends when you stop needing answers. But at 3 a.m., as I sat staring at that blinking cursor, I realized I wasn't done. Not even close. Something inside me had shifted. The email wasn't a threat. It was an invitation to play. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the darkness, I wanted to walk right into it. I started digging. The lawyer's name was Daniel Cross, a man my husband trusted like blood. When I searched his firm's website, his face was gone. Deleted. The company's About page returned a 404 error. But his name appeared somewhere else, in a federal case involving embezzlement, shell companies, and one dead witness. A woman named Lydia Hart. My heart stopped. The same Lydia from the video. The one my husband said would have disappeared. So maybe she hadn't. Maybe she'd been erased. I didn't go to the cops, they'd ask how I got the footage, why I had offshore files that should never exist. No. This wasn't for them. This was between me and whoever thought I was done playing. I created a burner account, one that couldn't be traced. Then I sent a message to the same encrypted address that had emailed me. Let's finish the story. Minutes later, a reply appeared. One word. Finally. It wasn't fear that flooded through me this time. It was clarity. Because whoever they were, they just confirmed what I suspected, they were watching. I started retracing my husband's steps. Bank records. Messages. The house he kept, 4 business trips. Each place was like a ghost trail, a breadcrumb path left for me to follow. And in each location, I found something left behind, a receipt, a hidden drive, a name scrawled on a notepad. Every clue felt staged, like someone wanted me to find them. The final stop was a rented cabin near the coast. I pushed open the door and smelled ocean salt mixed with old whiskey. The walls were bare except for one thing pinned to a corkboard, a printed photo. Me. Standing at the funeral, smiling. My knees nearly gave out. There was handwriting under the picture. "You did well." I tore it down, heart hammering, scanning the room for cameras. And then I heard it, a soft vibration from the corner desk. A phone. On the screen, one new message. He wasn't the only one keeping secrets. I typed back before I could stop myself. "Who are you?" No reply. Just 3 dots blinking. Then they vanished. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that photo, that handwriting, those words. He wasn't the only one keeping secrets. Did it mean me? Or someone else? My husband had betrayed me, yes. But what if the entire thing, the affair, the crash, the files, was orchestrated? What if I was never the avenger? What if I was the pawn? I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. No. Not anymore. They wanted me to dig. They wanted me to see. So I would. But on my terms. I opened my laptop again. Began typing what I remembered. The story. My voice. My version. If they were listening, they'd hear me. If they wanted to play God, I'd play the devil. Because there's something poetic about making your pain the weapon they never see coming. "You wanted me awake," I whispered to the screen. "Now you'll wish I'd stayed asleep." The cursor blinked, steady. And somewhere out there, I could swear I heard another computer chime back, as if someone else had just started typing too. The first rule of revenge is that it ends when you stop needing answers. But at 3 a.m., as I sat staring at that blinking cursor, I realized, I wasn't done. Not even close. Something inside me had shifted. The email wasn't a threat. It was an invitation to play. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the darkness, I wanted to walk right into it. I started digging. The lawyer's name was Daniel Cross, a man my husband trusted like blood. When I searched his firm's website, his face was gone. Deleted. The company's About page returned a 404 error. But his name appeared somewhere else, in a federal case involving embezzlement, shell companies, and one dead witness. A woman named Lydia Hart. My heart stopped. The same Lydia from the video. The one my husband said would disappear. So maybe she hadn't. Maybe she'd been erased. I didn't go to the cops, they'd ask how I got the footage, why I had offshore files that should never exist. No. This wasn't for them. This was between me and whoever thought I was done playing. I created a burner account, one that couldn't be traced. Then I sent a message to the same encrypted address that had emailed me. "Let's finish the story." Minutes later, a reply appeared. One word. Finally. It wasn't fear that flooded through me this time. It was clarity. Because whoever they were, they just confirmed what I suspected, they were watching. I started retracing my husband's steps. Bank records. Messages. The house he kept, 4 business trips. Each place was like a ghost trail, a breadcrumb path left for me to follow. And in each location, I found something left behind, a receipt, a hidden drive, a name scrawled on a notepad. Every clue felt staged, like someone wanted me to find them. The final stop was a rented cabin near the coast. I pushed open the door and smelled ocean salt mixed with old whiskey. The walls were bare except for one thing pinned to a corkboard, a printed photo. Me. Standing at the funeral, smiling. My knees nearly gave out. There was handwriting under the picture. "You did well." I tore it down, heart hammering, scanning the room for cameras. And then I heard it, a soft vibration from the corner desk. A phone. On the screen, one new message. He wasn't the only one keeping secrets. I typed back before I could stop myself. Who are you? No reply. Just 3 dots blinking. Then they vanished. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept seeing that photo, that handwriting, those words. He wasn't the only one keeping secrets. Did it mean me? Or someone else? My husband had betrayed me, yes. But what if the entire thing, the affair, the crash, the files, was orchestrated? What if I was never the avenger? What if I was the pawn? I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. No. Not anymore. They wanted me to dig. They wanted me to see. So I would. But on my terms. I opened my laptop again. Began typing what I remembered. The story. My voice. My version. If they were listening, they'd hear me. If they wanted to play God, I'd play the devil. Because there's something poetic about making your pain the weapon they never see coming. You wanted me awake, I whispered to the screen. Now you'll wish I'd stayed asleep. The cursor blinked, steady. And somewhere out there, I could swear I heard another computer chime back, as if someone else had just started typing too. The first sound that morning wasn't my alarm, it was the click of a notification. Someone had opened my document. Not me. My heart slammed against my ribs as I reached for the laptop. The cursor was moving on its own, letters forming, one by one. You're not ready to know who I am. I froze. The air felt thick, electric. For a long second, I could hear only the hum of the ceiling fan and my pulse echoing in my ears. Then another line appeared. But you will be soon. I slammed the laptop shut. The sound echoed through the room. My hands were shaking, but not from fear anymore, from the realization that this wasn't a ghost story. It was intentional. Someone alive, someone who knew everything, was still watching me. I left the house. Took my keys, my bag, nothing else. The world outside looked ordinary, almost offensively bright. People buying coffee, walking dogs, laughing into phones. No one had any idea that my entire life had turned into a psychological cage match. At a cafe downtown, I sat near the window and opened my phone. I needed control back, information, proof, something. I logged into an anonymous tracking program, traced the last digital fingerprint that had touched my file. Location, 3 blocks away. My stomach twisted. I turned slowly, scanning the street through the glass. And then I saw him. A man in a gray coat, phone in hand, watching me through the reflection. Not directly, cleverly, through the window's glare. He smirked when our eyes almost met. Then, just as calmly, he slipped into the crowd. I ran out the door, nearly knocking over a woman carrying a latte. But by the time I reached the street, he was gone. Only the faint scent of his cologne lingered. Something sharp and expensive. Like my husband's used to wear. That night, I couldn't keep the lights off. Every shadow looked like a person waiting to speak. I sat with my back to the wall, laptop on the coffee table. You wanted to play, I typed. Now it's my turn. No reply. Not for hours. Then, a file appeared in my downloads. Unprompted. The title, Redemption. I hesitated before opening it. Inside were videos, clips from security cameras, photos of me, timestamps from days I couldn't even remember. And one final frame that made my throat close up. It was me, standing by my husband's hospital bed. Smiling. Whispering something in his ear. Then the monitor flatlined. My chest tightened. I remembered that night. The sterile smell, the quiet hum of machines. But I didn't remember what I'd said. The message below the video read. You didn't just find out the truth that night. You delivered it. My hands went numb. The cursor blinked again, waiting for me to type. Who are you? I whispered. Then, as if mocking me, another message popped up. The better question is, who are you? I shut the screen, trembling. My reflection in the black glass stared back at me, calm, expressionless, almost unrecognizable. That smile again. The one from the funeral. It wasn't grief. It was memory. And now, I wasn't sure which was more terrifying, that someone else knew the truth. Or that maybe I did too. Sleep never came that night, only fragments of sound, distorted by guilt and adrenaline. The ticking clock sounded like a heart monitor, and each tick dragged me closer to a truth I wasn't sure I wanted to face. The file named Redemption still sat on my desktop, pulsing like a heartbeat. I opened it again. There it was, that video. Me, leaning close to my dying husband's ear, whispering something before the flatline. I stared at my own image until my throat tightened. I looked too calm. Too composed. And then, I remembered. It started months before his death. I'd found the pills hidden in his office drawer, not for him, but for me. A sedative, laced with something else. He had been planning to make my death look like an accident. He was a doctor. He knew how to do it cleanly. One quiet night. One perfect alibi. That's when everything inside me broke, or maybe it woke up. I began pretending. Smiling through dinners, acting oblivious, kissing him goodnight like a dutiful wife. All while waiting and recording. Because if he wanted to write my ending, I was going to edit his first. The night before his heart stopped, I swapped his medication with the very same poison he had meant for me. He looked at me in confusion when the pain began, clutching his chest, whispering my name. I remember leaning close, whispering back, not an apology, not a confession, just one line. You don't get to bury me. Then, I smiled. That same calm, knowing smile. And the next morning, when everyone told me to cry at the funeral, I couldn't. Because I already had, the night before. I closed the laptop, breathing hard. My reflection on the screen looked foreign, part victim, part villain. But which one was I? The voice message icon blinked again, a new message from the same unknown sender. I pressed play. A man's voice, low and deliberate, filled the room. You think justice ends when he dies? You never asked who helped him. The room spun. Helped him. My pulse spiked. He continued. He wasn't the only one who wanted you gone. You just finished his chapter. The others are still writing theirs. Then silence. I gripped the edge of the table. The fear that once paralyzed me now turned to ice in my veins. There was more. Someone else had been part of his plan. My mind began to race, his brother, his coworker, maybe even someone at the hospital. Every conversation replayed in my memory like scenes from a horror film. For the first time, I wasn't sure if I'd won, or if the real game was just beginning. Outside, a car engine started. The headlights flashed through my window for a split second, two blinding beams, then darkness again. I froze. Slow footsteps echoed up the walkway. Then, a knock. 3 slow, heavy knocks on my front door. My breath caught. The laptop lit up on its own, and a new line appeared across the screen. It's time for your turn to confess. That was when I realized this wasn't over. What began as revenge was no longer just about justice or closure. It was about survival. Because someone out there wanted to finish what he started. And this time, I wasn't the prey. The knocking didn't stop. 3 heavy beats, deliberate, patient, like whoever stood outside knew exactly how fear works, not in sudden jumps, but in steady rhythm. My heartbeat began to match it. I didn't move. Not at first. I just watched the door from across the room, every shadow around it shifting, stretching under the dim porch light. The wind outside carried faint whispers, or maybe that was just my mind replaying his last words. You don't get to bury me. But hadn't I already done that? The third knock came again, louder this time. I finally forced myself to move. 1 step. Then another. Each creak of the floorboard felt like a scream. Through the peephole, nothing. Just darkness. The porch light had gone out, even though it worked perfectly that morning. I whispered under my breath, if this is karma, she's right on schedule. And then, just as I reached for the lock, a voice came through the door. Calm. Masculine. Mrs. Langdon? My pulse froze. That name, my married name. No one had used it since the funeral. Mrs. Langdon, I think we need to talk about your husband. For a second, I thought it was some cop, or maybe one of his colleagues from the hospital. But something in his tone, too casual, too confident, told me otherwise. I didn't answer. Instead, I turned off every light in the house and backed away from the door, phone in hand. My fingers hovered over 911, but I didn't press it. Because what would I even say? Hello, someone's outside my house, and I think he knows my dead husband? They'd call me paranoid. Maybe they'd be right. I slid behind the curtains, peeking through the narrow slit. A tall man stood under the faint glow of the streetlight. Black coat. No umbrella. Just standing there, staring at the house like he'd been waiting for this moment his whole life. Then he smiled. A slow, practiced smile that felt like a signature. And he said, loud enough for me to hear through the glass. He told me you were smarter than him. Guess he was right. The blood drained from my face. The man turned and started walking away, not running, not hiding, just leaving, as if his message was delivered. A casual ghost fading into the fog. I waited 5 minutes before I finally unlocked the door and stepped outside. The air was freezing, heavy with the kind of silence that carries secrets. On the porch, lying right where he'd been standing, was an envelope. No name. Just one word written in ink, continue. Inside, a photograph. My husband. And beside him, me. Not a recent picture, it was taken months ago. But what chilled me was the third person in the frame, the man from the streetlight, standing in the background. Watching. My hands trembled so hard the picture slipped and landed face down. On the back, scribbled in the same handwriting, it said. He wasn't the only one who wanted you gone. I stumbled back inside, locking every door, every window. The walls felt smaller, like the house itself was closing in. I wanted to scream. To run. To tell someone. But who? Everyone who ever knew us, the couple, the perfect marriage, was gone or complicit. And then my laptop pinged. The same folder that had appeared before, Redemption, now had a new subfile. Part 2, Her Turn. I stared at it, hands shaking, as if it could open itself. It did. The screen went black for a few seconds. Then a new video began to play. The first frame froze my breath, the man's face. The same man from outside. He looked directly into the camera and said. You thought revenge was an ending. It's only the first act. The moment his face appeared on my laptop screen, the room shrank. Every shadow deepened, and the faint hum of the fridge in the kitchen felt too loud, like the house itself was holding its breath with me. The man's voice came through clear, calm, and steady. You think you've buried him, but he's still here. You just haven't been looking in the right place. Then he smiled, a slow, mocking curve that felt rehearsed, like a teacher waiting for a student to understand a cruel lesson. The video flickered. Static blurred the edges. And then, suddenly, another image appeared, a mirror. My mirror. The one above my dresser, filmed from an angle that shouldn't have existed. There I was, visible in the reflection, asleep in my bed. My stomach dropped. That meant someone had been here, inside my home. Watching. Recording. I slammed the laptop shut, my pulse roaring in my ears. The walls felt alive, crawling with unseen eyes. I checked every door, every window, every lock. I wanted to believe it was a trick, but deep down, I knew the truth, this wasn't just about revenge anymore. This was control. Hours passed, though they didn't feel like hours. I sat in the dark, clutching a kitchen knife, staring at the mirror across the room. I half expected to see him behind me in it. But all I saw was her, the woman I'd become. Pale. Hollow-eyed. Not grieving, not living. Just waiting. That's when I remembered the envelope's word, continue. Maybe it wasn't a threat. Maybe it was a command. I reopened the laptop, hesitating before double-clicking the video again. This time, I watched every second carefully. Behind the man, faint in the background, was a wall covered with photographs. Some I recognized, our wedding, my husband's office, the funeral, but others were new. Pictures of me walking to the grocery store. Sitting in my car. Picking up mail. Whoever this man was, he had been following me for weeks, maybe months. And then, one final frame. My husband, alive. Not recent. Not old. But it was a video clip, not a photo. He was talking to someone off camera. His voice low, urgent. If she finds out before the deal closes, we're both dead. You understand? The video cut to black before I could process it all. I leaned back, shaking. Everything I thought I knew of the affair, the betrayal, the funeral, it all twisted into something darker. Maybe he hadn't been planning to leave me for another woman. Maybe it was business. Maybe it was something worse. And the man outside, maybe he wasn't just a stranger. Maybe he was my husband's unfinished business. My reflection caught my eye again. I turned toward the mirror, whispering. What do you want from me? For a split second, I could have sworn I saw movement behind my own reflection. A flicker. Like a hand brushing past the frame. Then, a faint vibration from the laptop. A new message notification. Unknown sender, you'll understand once you look inside the mirror. I froze. My mind raced back to the hidden camera angle from the video. If he recorded me through that mirror. I stepped closer, heart pounding. The frame felt heavier than it should have when I touched it. I lifted it off the wall and found a tiny black device taped to the back. A camera lens. I dropped it like it burned me. Behind it, carved into the wall in jagged letters, was a phrase. His secrets died. Yours are next. I stood there, gripping the edge of the dresser, trying to steady my breathing. For the first time since the funeral, I realized this wasn't revenge anymore. This was inheritance. He had left me something behind. Not love, not money, but a legacy of enemies. And now, they wanted me to play his part. I didn't sleep that night. The words carved behind the mirror, his secrets died. Yours are next, kept looping through my mind like a curse that refused to fade. Every creak in the house felt personal. Every shadow felt alive. But fear wasn't the only thing that grew in me that night, so did fury. He'd left me a mess, a ghost, and a target. If this was a game, I was done playing by their rules. By dawn, I'd gathered every piece of his life I could find. The storage boxes in the basement. His old phone. The laptop he used for consultations that didn't exist. The laptop was locked, of course, but I'd seen him type his password too many times not to remember it. His fingers had always danced over the same 4 letters, mine. It worked. The screen lit up, cold blue, revealing a desktop organized too neatly to be innocent. Folders labeled with client names, company initials, and one that made my breath catch, Violet. That was my name. I opened it. Inside were photos, dozens of them, each one tagged with a date and location. Grocery runs. Hair salon. A park bench I hadn't sat on in years. And then a single video file, last night. My hands shook as I clicked. The footage was grainy, shot from across the street. It showed me standing by our mailbox. Then another figure stepped into the frame, him. My husband. Alive. Talking to the man I'd seen outside my house last night. She's starting to notice, my husband said. Then let her, the man replied. That's how we'll know if she's ready. The clip ended there. No explanation. Just static. Ready for what? I whispered. The question echoed in the empty house, swallowed by silence. But I already knew the answer. He'd been setting something up before he died, or before I thought he died. I checked the rest of the files, and deep inside another folder, I found an address. No context, just a line of text. Warehouse 19, Friday, 9 p.m. That was tomorrow. Would you go, knowing the man you buried might be waiting in the dark? I closed the laptop and stared out the window. The world outside looked normal, birds, sunlight, neighbors walking dogs. But inside me, something had changed. I wasn't just a widow anymore. I was a woman hunting answers. That evening, I went through his things one last time. Tucked inside one of his jackets was a small voice recorder. When I pressed play, his voice filled the room. If you're hearing this, Violet, it means you opened the laptop. It means you found the mirror. Good. Don't call the police. They're not on your side. You need to finish what I couldn't. Finish what? Everything's connected. The clinic, the investments, the name Adler. You'll find him when you stop running. And Violet. A long pause. Then softly. Don't trust anyone who knocks. The tape clicked off. I sat there, the recorder heavy in my hand. Somewhere between grief and rage, I began to smile. He thought he could leave me clues like I was some fragile widow desperate for closure. But if this was his test, I'd pass it in ways he never imagined. I poured myself a glass of wine, stared at the reflection in the dark window, and whispered. You wanted to play, love? Then let's play. I set the address in my GPS tomorrow night. I'd walk straight into the trap he'd built, because the only way to beat a ghost is to become one. The GPS voice guided me through backroads I didn't recognize, old industrial lanes just outside the city, where the streetlights were sparse and the air smelled like rust and rain. I'd left my phone in airplane mode. If he, or whoever he worked for, was watching, I didn't want them tracking me. I'd memorized the address. I'd rehearsed every possible outcome: confrontation, discovery, death. All three felt equally likely. When I reached the warehouse, it was exactly as I imagined it, abandoned, hollow, a skeleton of metal and echoes. The sign on the gate read, Adler and Sons Logistics. There it was. The name from the recorder. I parked 2 blocks away and walked the rest on foot, boots crunching on gravel. Every sound made me glance over my shoulder, but fear had turned into something sharper now: focus. I wasn't here to hide. I was here to finish what he started. Inside, the air was thick with dust and decay. My flashlight sliced through the darkness, catching bits of old equipment, stacks of crates, and a row of metal filing cabinets at the far wall. The silence was so absolute it felt like a living thing. Until a soft click. The unmistakable sound of a door closing somewhere behind me. You're early, a voice said. I spun around, beam landing on him, the same man from the video, the same one who stood outside my house. The black coat, the calm posture, that faint smirk that made my skin crawl. Where is he? I demanded. My husband. He took a slow step forward. Which version do you want? The one you buried, or the one who betrayed you? I want the truth. He laughed softly, as if the word itself amused him. Truth isn't what you think it is, Violet. He didn't die for love or guilt. He died because he tried to outsmart the people who built his fortune. People like me. You killed him? I gave him a choice, he said simply. He chose wrong. He stepped closer, voice dropping. And now, you've inherited his debt. My pulse hammered, but I didn't move back. I'd already decided before coming here that I wouldn't leave empty-handed, or alive, without answers. What do you want from me? I asked. He studied me for a moment, eyes narrowing. You're sharper than he said. Good. We like sharp. There's a ledger in that cabinet behind you. Take a look. I turned slowly, keeping my light on him while opening the drawer. Inside were stacks of old files, all labeled with names and numbers. Some I recognized: clients, doctors, investors. Others, ordinary people. Every file had two things: a transaction ID and a photograph. And one of them was mine. A full dossier. My name, address, bank records, even the therapy notes I'd never shared with anyone. My throat tightened. He was watching me before he died. You all were. He smiled. Correction, he was preparing you. My hands trembled as I flipped through the pages. One sentence, scribbled in my husband's handwriting, stood out. She'll survive what I couldn't. She's built for this. I looked up at the man, a mix of confusion and disgust burning inside me. Built for what? For power, he said. You think he built his empire alone? You were part of it from the start. The charity accounts, the signatures, the approvals, you were his silent partner. You're one of us, Violet. Whether you admit it or not. I took a step back, shaking my head. I didn't sign up for this. Doesn't matter, he said. It's already in motion. And if you walk away now, you'll end up exactly where he did. He turned toward the exit, leaving me standing there under the dim flicker of my flashlight. Welcome to the family, Mrs. Langdon. I stood frozen, the paper still trembling in my hands. In that moment, I understood, the revenge I thought I wanted wasn't against him anymore. It was against everything he'd built, and everyone who thought I was too fragile to hold it together. The warehouse wasn't a graveyard. It was an invitation. And I had just RSVP'd. The drive home felt like a dream I couldn't wake from. The highway lights flickered like signals, warnings, maybe. I kept replaying his words in my head, you're one of us. The phrase clung to me like smoke. For days after, I moved through the house like a ghost, coffee brewed, clothes folded, dishes washed, but everything was mechanical. My reflection in the mirror looked the same, calm, soft, harmless. The same woman who smiled at her husband's funeral. But inside, something had shifted. He'd prepared me, that much was clear. But for what? I went through the box of documents I'd found hidden in the attic weeks earlier: bank transfers, shell company names, lists of offshore accounts. At first, it all seemed like evidence of deceit. Now, I realized it was a blueprint. He hadn't built his empire alone. He'd built it with me, my name, my trust, my ignorance. He'd used my identity to protect himself. And when his house of lies began to crumble, he made sure I was standing right beneath it. Only he didn't count on me picking up the pieces. I opened his old laptop. The password wasn't hard to guess. He'd always used the same thing, our wedding date, reversed. Sentimental, predictable, arrogant. The desktop was cluttered with encrypted files and spreadsheets. It took me hours, but eventually I found a folder labeled Echo. Inside were names, lots of them. Names tied to accounts I now legally controlled. Some were familiar from the warehouse files, others new. They weren't just victims or investors. They were participants. A network of people laundering money through charities, property sales, even political donations. My husband was only a middleman. And that man at the warehouse, he wasn't his boss. He was his replacement. I sat back, staring at the screen, my pulse steady now. Built for power, he said. Fine. Then I'd use it. But not the way they expected. The next morning, I called my lawyer. Calm voice. Polite smile. I'd like to reopen the Langdon Foundation accounts, I said. Yes, I'm stepping in as sole director. He didn't question me. No one ever does when you speak like you belong. That's when I realized my real advantage. They all underestimated me, the silent wife, the grieving widow. They saw compliance, not calculation. Pity, not purpose. I used that. Within a week, I had access to every financial key my husband once held. By the second week, I began transferring funds, not out of the system, but deeper into it. I wanted them to think I was following orders. I left breadcrumbs, fabricated emails, and staged mistakes that looked like I was struggling to keep up. They watched, I knew. But they didn't interfere. They wanted me to evolve, to become his echo. And I did. On the surface. Beneath, I was building my own map. My own escape route. Every night, I saved files to an offline drive, cataloging names, amounts, and dates. People who'd profited from pain. From lies. From blood. If I can't undo what you did, I whispered to his old photograph, then I'll outsmart the ones you served. One evening, I received a message from an unknown number. The board would like to meet you. Tomorrow, 9:30 p.m. Same place. No name, no signature. I stared at it for a long time before replying. I'll be there. I wasn't afraid anymore. I'd played their game long enough to understand the rules. Now I was ready to rewrite them. That night, as I packed my things, I caught my reflection again. Same face, same calm expression. But my eyes looked different. Cold. Controlled. He'd once told me I wasn't built for darkness. That I was too good, too soft. He was wrong. I wasn't breaking anymore. I was becoming. The building stood silent at the edge of the city, glass and concrete wrapped in darkness. It wasn't marked by any sign, just a faint light spilling through tinted windows. Inside, I could already feel the chill before I stepped through the door. They were expecting me. The same man from the warehouse greeted me at the entrance. His voice was low, patient. Mrs. Langdon. You're right on time. I gave him the kind of smile a woman wears when she knows she's being watched. Calm. Controlled. He motioned me forward, down a long hallway lined with mirrors. My reflection followed me, 20 versions of myself, walking towards something I couldn't turn away from. At the end of the corridor, double doors opened into a dim room. A round table. 7 people seated around it. Men and women, all dressed in black. Faces shadowed, voices steady. Sit, one of them said. I didn't hesitate. The air was thick with something unspoken. Power. Threat. Memory. They began talking about the accounts, the money, the structure I now controlled. They called it inheritance. I called it debt. Your husband's death was unfortunate, said a woman with white hair and a diamond brooch. But you've handled things with admirable discretion. I met her gaze. Discretion is survival. A few quiet chuckles. They liked that. They wanted to believe I was one of them. The man at the head of the table leaned forward. His cufflinks glinted like tiny knives. Do you understand the nature of what we do, Mrs. Langdon? I looked him straight in the eye. I understand that you prefer loyalty over truth. He smiled. Then you understand perfectly. They began outlining tasks, transactions to authorize, names to approve, shipments to overlook. All couched in vague language. Nothing illegal on paper, everything rotten beneath. I listened. Memorized every detail. Every face. Every subtle nod exchanged between them. They thought I was taking mental notes to serve them. I was taking evidence to destroy them. At one point, the woman with the diamond brooch said softly. You remind me of him. The way you hide your nerves. I tilted my head. Maybe I learned from the best. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Or maybe you learned from the worst. The table went quiet. That was my first small victory. An hour later, the meeting ended. As I stood, the man in the black coat placed a folder in front of me. For your next authorization, he said. You'll find everything you need inside. When I glanced at the top page, my breath caught for half a second, just long enough for him to notice. The document wasn't about an account. It was a name. Lydia Harrow. My maiden name. You're thorough, I said, voice even. We have to be, he replied. Trust is earned. He smiled then, a slow, deliberate curve. We're glad you're finally becoming one of us. I left the building and stepped into the cool night air, the city lights smearing across the windshield like streaks of fire. My hands shook for the first time in weeks. Not from fear, but from realization. They weren't just testing me. They were watching how far I'd go. The folder on the seat beside me felt heavier than paper should. I didn't open it. Not yet. I needed to plan. Because whatever game this was, the next move was mine. It started with whispers. The kind that slide under locked doors and spread faster than truth ever could. By the time I arrived at the next meeting, the air had changed. No polite smiles. No casual greetings. Just silence, thick and watching. Every gaze on me felt sharp enough to draw blood. I took my seat slowly. My hands were steady, but my heartbeat was not. The folder I carried wasn't theirs this time, it was mine. A weapon disguised as paperwork. You've been busy, Mrs. Langdon, said the man in the black coat, his voice colder than usual. Unusual transactions. Unexpected transfers. Should we be concerned? His eyes held a faint amusement, like a cat watching a bird trapped in a cage. I smiled, a small, deliberate thing. Concern is just fear pretending to be control. A low hum of voices rippled around the table. He tilted his head. Are you suggesting we've lost control? I'm suggesting, I said, that maybe you never had it. The woman with the diamond brooch slammed her hand on the table. Enough riddles. What game are you playing? I placed my folder in the center. The click of the metal clasp echoed like a gunshot. The same one you taught my husband to play, I said softly. Only this time, I know the rules. Inside the folder were documents, copies of every transaction, name, and shadowed deal I traced back to them. Their entire empire, mapped out in black and white. For a second, no one breathed. The man in the black coat leaned forward, expression unreadable. And what exactly do you think you're going to do with this? I met his gaze. Oh, I already did. A flicker of something, panic, crossed his face. You think you're clever, he said. No, I replied. I'm careful. That was the moment the screens around the room lit up. Every one of them flickered to life, showing the same files, the same evidence, being uploaded to servers, drives, names, and faces spilling into light. A perfect symphony of exposure. By the time you delete one, I said, 100 more will exist. Insurance, you could say. The room erupted in chaos. Voices shouting, chairs scraping, panic rising like smoke. I just sat there, calm, almost serene. Watching the mask slip from each face. Watching power crumble in real time. The man in the black coat didn't move. He just looked at me, quiet, assessing. You killed him, didn't you? He said at last. The room went still again. Who? I asked, knowing full well what he meant. Your husband. I buried him, I said evenly. There's a difference. He smiled then, a real one, small and dangerous. Maybe you do belong here after all. Security stormed in moments later. The lights dimmed, alarms started wailing. But I was already walking out, every step echoing like punctuation. Outside, the night was sharp and beautiful. The city didn't care what had just happened, it pulsed on, alive and indifferent. In the reflection of the glass doors, I saw myself, no longer the grieving wife, no longer the victim. Something else entirely. You wanted a confession, I whispered to the ghost of his voice. Here it is. As I reached my car, I noticed an envelope under the wiper blade. No name. No markings. Just one line inside. You're not done yet. I looked up at the dark skyline and smiled, a slow, knowing curve that tasted like victory and danger all at once. The game wasn't over. It had just evolved. The night was clean. Too clean. Like the city had rinsed itself of everything dirty except me. I parked the car on the edge of the old bridge, the one he used to take me to when he wanted to pretend we were still in love. The wind cut across the water, carrying whispers that almost sounded like him. That envelope still sat in my hand, the ink smudged from my thumb. "You're not done yet." I laughed softly to myself. Of course I'm not. The world had taken enough from me, my peace, my trust, my name. I wasn't here to find closure anymore. I was here to finish a cycle that had begun long before his funeral smile. When I opened the envelope again, I noticed a faint watermark beneath the message, a crest I recognized from the files I'd leaked. A symbol belonging to a deeper circle within the same organization my husband worked for. The rot went deeper. The puppet strings extended further than I had imagined. A part of me wanted to walk away. To disappear. To let the truth rot with them. But then I remembered the sound of my own voice the night before his funeral, trembling but alive. "You can break me once. But I'll never let you bury me twice." And that was enough. I walked to the edge of the bridge and looked down at the water. My reflection stared back, older, colder, and somehow more me than ever before. "He thought he was the last lesson," I whispered. But he was just the introduction. In that moment, I took out the small black drive from my pocket, the real drive, not the copies. The one that held everything. Proof of how far the corruption went. Names of men and women who had built their fortunes on broken lives. I placed it on the railing and watched it glint under the city lights. "You wanted control," I said to the ghosts. "You wanted silence. But you built me instead." Then I let it fall. The splash below was small, but it echoed like thunder. The past sinking beneath the surface, finally drowned. When I turned back to my car, someone was leaning against it, a tall figure in a dark coat, face half hidden in shadow. My pulse didn't spike. It didn't need to. "You did what we couldn't," he said quietly. "You burned them down. And you are? Someone who's been watching. Someone who thinks you're wasted in grief." He stepped closer, sliding a small card into my hand. No name. Just coordinates and a single word, "Next." "There's always another nest," he said. "Another empire rotting from within. You've got a talent, Mrs. Langdon. Don't waste it." And just like that, he was gone, swallowed by the fog rolling off the river. I stood there for a long time, the card heavy in my hand. The wind tugged at my hair. The city hummed. Somewhere below, the truth slept at the bottom of the river. And me? I smiled, slow, deliberate, the same smile that started it all. "They told me to cry at his funeral," I murmured. But maybe that was just my rehearsal. As I slipped into the driver's seat and the engine growled to life, I caught my reflection in the mirror, no longer the widow, no longer the victim. A quiet storm in red lipstick and calm eyes. The game wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about evolution. And this time, I was the one writing the rules.